Hi everyone, in today's game we're going to see a very nice attacking game where white sacrifices 2 rooks and a queen in 3 consecutive moves. So there's literally no way to sacrifice more material. So without further ado, let's get started with this game, which was played in Budapest, but playing as white was Esteban Canal, who was a leading Peruvian player who was playing a simultaneous exhibition against an amateur. So besides playing against this opponent, he was playing simultaneously against other players, which makes this game probably even more impressive. So here, Canal started with the move e4, and black played the move d5. We get what we call the Scandinavian defense. Black counterattacks on the center straight away, but after pawn takes, if black captures with the queen, as it happened in the game, white gets a developing move attacking the queen, so this is a minor drawback of this defense. And after queen to a5, which is a very common move in the position, d4, here black played the move c6, which is a very common move, but it is probably a bit less flexible. Here knight to f6 is in my view more natural, but now we'll see the idea of c6. Here black was waiting for knight to f3 in order to pin the knight after bishop to g4. Just want to mention that developing the bishop, for example, to f5 is also very common, but bishop to g4 is also a common idea in the position. And here white developed with bishop to f4, and after e6, h3, here black captured on f3, which makes sense because black is placing the pawns on light squares, so giving this bishop on g4 is not that bad. And additionally, after bishop to h5, if black doesn't want to capture the knight, then white might start pushing the pawns with g4 and h4. So after bishop takes and queen takes, here black played another relatively strange move, bishop to b4. At least this is not a move that I would play. Again, developing with knight to f6, maybe then bring the bishop to e7, looked more natural to me. Bishop to b4 pins the knight, but this knight is well protected by the queen. That's why here Canal continued with bishop to e2, and after knight to d7, here white played the move a3, which turned out to be a brilliant idea, particularly after black's continuation. So here black castled long, which as we'll see didn't end well, but here black had other ideas, for example developing the knight. The point is that the pawn a3 is pinned, so if black plays something like knight f to g6, if white captures, then black will capture the rook on a1. Another idea is to capture the knight on c3, and here the most ambitious way to continue is to take with the pawn, keeping the queens on the board, but taking with the queen is also possible. And in this position white gets 2 bishops against 2 knights. White has a stable advantage, even though white gets double pawns. This is definitely a position that I would prefer to play as white. But the game was a lot less subtle, because after black castled, here white played some really nice sacrifices, which I think that were not very hard to find for a player of Canal's caliber, and I will explain you afterwards why. So first, he took the bishop on b4, sacrificing the rook on a1, and after king to d2, there's actually another rook that can be captured. And black doesn't have a lot of alternatives, but let's first see the spectacular finish. So here after queen takes, black got 2 rooks for a bishop, but the problem is that white has this very nice follow-up. Queen takes e6, the only way to continue for black is to capture the queen, and after bishop to a6, we get this very pretty checkmate. So we see how the 2 bishops combine very well to deliver a checkmate. So going back to this position, now we see the main idea that the queen has been driven to a1, it was on a5, and the queen cannot go back on the a file to prevent white's idea, which is queen takes e6. That's why here black is in trouble in any lines. For example, after queen takes, white still gets the same idea of sacrificing the bishop, of sacrificing the queen, delivering a checkmate. There was a very subtle move here in this position, but it still wouldn't have saved black, which is the move knight to e5. So here black is trying to give back material, and we see that the knight on d7 was not allowing the king to escape. So here after knight to e5, black is sacrificing the knight, but also having the idea to take on f3 in some lines. But I just want to mention that this idea wouldn't work. White even has the safe option of going rook takes a1, and after knight takes and bishop takes, white gets 2 minor pieces for a rook, which materially is already even better for white. And additionally, all of white's pieces are actually quite active, so this position is also quite bad for black. But after knight to e5, white also gets a more spectacular way to continue, which is to first take the knight, and now after black captures the rook, here we need to be careful about not going queen takes e6, because in this particular position black is the one winning, because now we see the idea of knight to e5, the king gets the d7 square, and black is just keeping the material advantage and a winning position. But instead of queen takes e6, white still gets a crushing attack after queen takes f7. Here white has a lot of ideas. Queen to c7 checkmate is the main threat, but also taking the pawn e6. And in this position black doesn't have any convincing way to defend. For example, after rook to d7, white can give a few checks and force a checkmate. After queen to e8, rook to d8 is forced, and after queen takes e6, again rook to d7 is forced. And after queen to e8 and rook to d8, we see the idea that after this pawn was captured, now the bishop can join the party and deliver a checkmate after bishop to g4. This is not a forced line, but the main point is that white gets a crushing attack. In any case, going back to the game, these moves might look very hard to find, but once you know this checkmate idea, it becomes a lot easier. So if we go back to the position, now we see that we want to reach this checkmate position with a bishop on a6, but here we see that the queen is there. That's why the pawn of taking on b4 is to drive the queen away from the a file. So after queen takes, king to d2, and queen takes, now we get this very nice queen sacrifice that again would deflect the pawn from b7 to c6 to allow us to give this very nice checkmate. And this checkmate pattern is actually well known. It is called Boden's mate. It is named after a chess player called Samuel Boden. So once you know this idea of two attacking bishops in crossing diagonals, you can try to find a way to reach those positions in advance. This checkmating pattern very often occurs when a king has castled queenside, but it can occur in other positions. So let's take this example, which is taken from a game played by former world champion Alexander Alyoshin, again in a simultaneous exhibition. So this really shows how strong players find these ideas easily because they already know the patterns. So here we might at least quickly check if there's any idea to checkmate a king by having two bishops attacking on crossing diagonals. So here the two bishops are aiming this way. Here we also see how the dark square bishop is very strong. It doesn't allow black to castle, but the bishop on d3 is not attacking. But let's imagine if we could bring the bishop to g6, eyeing the king. This has the potential to give a checkmate, but in this particular position there's a pawn f7, which doesn't allow us to do that. But white might have ideas to take the pawn e6, deflecting the pawn from f7 to e6. And here black was probably not familiar with this pattern, or at least he missed it for this particular game, and black played the move b6. It was important to try to prevent this idea by going c5 or moving the knight away. For example, after knight to b6, now the pawn on e6 is overprotected by the bishop. But after the move b6, here white played the very nice queen takes e6, and after pawn takes and bishop to e6, we got a very nice checkmating pattern. So I hope that you enjoy these nice attacking games. Keep in mind this idea of studying attacking patterns, checkmating ideas. They will really help you find the best moves when you attack. In any case, that's it for now. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.